Hey guys, what's going on? This is Sammy and Marcus, leading off for our first episode of The Perfect Double.
What's going on, guys? Well, we brought you in. We're going to talk a little bit about competition shooting, some of the first things that we've learned. We're both newer at the game, but we've advanced pretty quickly. We learned a lot uh, in our journey trying to make it to Grandmaster. The this first episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to go out to your first match, participate for the first time, and some of the other things that we kind of learned along the way. Sammy, why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience so far and how it's been for you?
I mean, so I started shooting right when Bruin got announced so that we can actually get concealed carry. Because I'm from, New York. I'm in the Westchester County area. We do things a little bit differently down here. Everything's a process. It took me 2 years to get my permit.
Mhm.
So I finally got up at like 23, 24. And then I got into competition shooting. So I've only been really shooting competitively for like 3-ish years officially, but
Mm.
only really 2 active seasons. So, I started off like everybody else, started going to my first locals around the area, didn't do so well, wanted to do better. So I looked for guidance. And thankfully, I have a lot of mentors, a lot of coaches like Sam, Kita, Mason, Rob, Tim Heron, like all those guys who kind of led me down the right path. I've had Christopher Wong, who was one of the first instructors I ever had, as well as Gil from Fortune Consulting. So like I've had a plethora of people to like help me along my way and kind of set me up for success. But like the first year, dude, until I actually put the effort in, it was like a lost cause. I was like all over the place, just like a mid-tier C shooter. I couldn't figure it out.
For me, it was um, fall 2024, right before winter came. So I'm over on the other side of New York in Buffalo, Rochester area. So I got to shoot maybe one outdoor match, and then we were inside. Running the stuff inside. Thought I was getting pretty good, and then got back outside and realized that it's a whole different ball game. One of the things I think is when you first go out, you, I first went out, I'd been shooting steel, some stuff like that with some friends and thought I was getting pretty good. And you find out this is a whole different ball of wax. Um, but kind of like you, I was terrible my first time out. I look at those videos fondly and laugh at them and realize, wow, um, I'm terrible. And I want to be better at this. Some people, they come, they find out they're terrible, they never come back, and some people, it becomes a thing for them that they have to get better at. So, um, definitely respect that, and I think, um,
Mhm.
just like anything else, in order to be good at it, you gotta be willing to be bad, and how long you're gonna be bad is kind of up to how much you're willing to put in and how much you're willing to give to it.
Yeah, man. Like I had to like take so like after my first shot at doing it on my own, I was like, I'm not winning anything. I'm like middle of the pack, maybe like, top third at best. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So once I admitted that to myself and humbled myself and was like, all right, let's look at this as a holistic overall approach to my shooting and like my mental state of this.
Mhm.
And I started seeking answers and thinking about everything like analytically. Things became a lot more easy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like I was able to like break down like not all first of all I have to get the knowledge. So like that's where all my coaches come in. But once I got that knowledge, I'm able to analyze what I'm doing in real time and like be like, okay, cool. Like this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I need to do on the next stage. So when I shoot a large format match, I end up doing pretty well. And I've been seeing a lot of great success in that in the last like year or so.
This last year, you went all the way from C to M.
Yeah, 3 times.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
special.
I did it in LO and CO,
Mhm.
and then I did it in PCC recently.
Yeah, so, I mean, would you say that the things a lot of times when new shooters come up, they do a lot of the wrong things fast. They try to they get too focused on splits and things of that nature. What would you say the things that you carried from each division that allowed you to move forward so quickly?
I mean, I feel like a lot of guys, including myself, like I was also at fault for this. Like I mean, I'm a gun guy, I'm a gear guy as well. Like I've been shooting guns since I was a little kid. Not
Mhm.
seriously, obviously, but I've always been into them, into like the shooting games and whatnot. And I used to play paintball competitively, airsoft a little bit too. So like firearms was my natural progression into the community, I guess. But from there, like I bought the Gucci guns. I started off with a Glock, went to a CZ like right away. I didn't really understand how good of a gun the CZ was, and I always thought like, "Yo, it's my gun's fault," or like, "Yo, it's my optic is something's wrong with that." But until like I took the time to like really get the instruction and get the fundamentals down and see like, all right, cool, like it's not the gear, it's more so the effort and time you put in. Like kind of like I said, you have to be humble to yourself and just really admit your faults. And then once you do that, everything else becomes a lot easier. It's gonna suck at first because you're being like, well, shit, I suck. Now I have to put in work, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's dry firing, even like 10 to 15 minutes or an hour, like whatever you need to do to get to that point where you want to be at. Unfortunately, it's gonna require some sort of work, whether you like it or not.
Right. No, 100% agree. For me, the answer was dry fire. Dry fire, dry fire, dry fire. At first, the first time I was told it, kind of ignored. The first few times I was told it, I kind of ignored it. I was like, yeah, whatever. I got to get out here and put rounds down. That's the only way it's going to happen. But really, the cheapest and I'd say the most efficient way is dry fire, just because it doesn't cost you anything but time and some focus. My first year, I went from C to A. My first summer shooting 2025, and I was shooting the CZ because I had an Atlas and I started having issues with it, so I sent it in to get repaired. And by the time all that was done, I was mid-season with the CZ, and it's a phenomenal pistol. I think people write it off. It's cheaper. It's not a super expensive gun like an Atlas or some of
Mhm.
the 2011s that people are really fond of nowadays. I got into shooting from collecting firearms. I was never a gun guy until about 7 years ago. I got my permit in Erie County, and that took 16 months. It took so long, I remember it because I forgot I applied for it. So, it was and then I got a letter in the
Yeah,
mail.
dude, that's a
I was like
long time.
right. Yeah, I was like, what does the county want now? What happened?" And when I got my permit, the first gun I got, I think, was a Walther PPQ.
Mhm.
Uh, Another really good gun. I didn't know enough about shooting to respect how good of a gun it was either. And from there, I bought like 50 some odd handguns. Um, Never really learned. I got good at shooting the paper in the lanes at the range because in New York, there's not really many places where you can go and draw from holster and learn to do much of the actual skill building. So I eventually I found out Atlas. I bought a bunch of staccatos. I loved those. Then I got a couple Atlases. I love those as well. And then I actually got out to the range and started shooting. And I was like, why don't, why don't these expensive guns help at all?
Mhm.
They do hide some of the inefficiencies and your grip and your ability to keep the gun still, and aim it properly, but it's not going to solve any of the issues you have in running USPSA, because USPSA, the skills, transitions, entries, exits, things of that nature are uh, are something that you really have to build and focus on. So, but once I got in, I started shooting that CZ. I think I took my first class with Bull Creek Strategic over in Lockport out here in Western New York. Shout out to those guys. I took one of their competition classes and learned a lot that spring. And then I think I took a class with Tom Castro at the end of last year. Um, and he corrected a lot of things that were wrong with my grip. Took it to another. My grip wasn't terrible, but he took it to another level. Um, I think right after I took his class, I shot some qualifiers and I made it to A class. So, um, it's a lot of fun. I I think the classification system, I like the changes they made to it, so you can't just keep shooting it and level up just by shooting it over and over again. I think it calls on a little bit of honesty for folks to have to. You're running it like you run another stage. It comes along with the match. You shoot it. You do well at it. You're playing the law of averages. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes and you have malfunctions. It's just part of kind of what goes on with your match. Um, and I like that it's something now because I think it keeps the classifications honest, and it keeps everybody in where they belong. I got into A. I think I'm a lower level A shooter. I think I'm still building that. I think I'm still I'm working on getting that better. Um, but one of the things I realized after you level up You show up to the match with your letter and then get beat by a B shooter. Like what, what happened? Because at the end of the day, you gotta, you still got to show up to the match and shoot the targets and display the skills um, in a way that 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 is competitive. For the next segment, do you want to? We can move into what happens at your first match.
Let's talk about that for the people who don't know. So when you go to your first match, right? Like I am thankful enough where I have the opportunity to run a match with my buddy Noah at Artemis Shooting Sports in Zelmford. So anybody who's in the area, definitely come check us out. But again, like shooting your first match, obviously you need a belt, you need a gun, you need eyes and ears, you need a like in New York at least, you need at least like 4 to 5 bags, right? Just based on because we're 10 round. Well, I do it in four sometimes. We'll see. But again, like you need the bags. But if you're like out of state, you can get away with running it with 3 mags.
Mhm,
But again, like you need those things at a minimum and just like a willingness to kind of come up and just have fun, really.
mhm,
I mean, I don't know. Like I literally showed up to my first match with a Glock, a belt and like 5 mag pouches. And that's
mhm.
literally, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Somebody, show me along. And thankfully, we have a good crowd, especially in the lower New York area where they want to teach, where they want to bring people in. And like, it's just the whole area is kind of exploded with matches and clubs now. Like there's 2 level 2s in the lower New York region, which was never heard of until this year. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, the no, I 100% agree. I think the belt, the mags, I keep four. I have four on belt on my that I keep on my belt. I have one on the magnet that's going to go on my gun, so I have four. Along the way, just in case I had a tendency early on to make mistakes or need to drop a mag early or whatever the case was. So that was helpful for me. The it's great if you can find somebody that already is doing it, but sometimes you can't. When I got into USPSA shooting, I reached out to a few different clubs and everybody was like, "Oh, you need to have shot a match before." I was like, "Well, how do I shoot my first match if I need to have shot a match before?" It was like
Hmm.
kind of like after college trying to get my first job. It was it's like, well, how do I get experience if I've never gotten any experience
No,
before?
that's a big fact. I
Hmm.
agree. I mean, we have a, I guess, different mentality down here. Like all
Hmm.
the clubs here, like I first time I ever shot a match was at what it was used to be. It's now Artemis, but it used to be Blue Line.
Hmm.
And that was with Christopher Wong. And that was the very first match. And that was a low light match. And I didn't know
Hmm.
what the hell I was doing, bro. I showed up like so unprepared for this.
Yeah.
I was pondering it for like, 3, 4 months. I was like, I just gotta do it and just like not
Mhm,
worry about the repercussions and just like get into it. And after that, I found like NWRA was another club in like Peekskill area where they ran like some outlaw matches, and I got a hand of like the rules, regulations, and then I went to Dutchess, Lipsa, Staten Island, like, and then everything else afterwards.
awesome. Yeah, my first match was with the guys at Western New York Practical Pistol League in the Buffalo area. They have once a month they bring in new shooters. They kind of introduce them to the game. They go over the rules with them. They go over the commands, all of those things, so you can kind of understand what it is you need to be able to do and what's required of you. I would say if you're really interested in USPSA, it is important to have some fundamental gun skills. Um, I wouldn't tell someone to show up there if they've never really gotten any rounds down in their gun. I think it's important to have some fundamental skills. I think you some things you can do before you just show up out there. You can practice unloading, show clear. You can practice your draw. You can practice just moving and not breaking the 180 because those are things that will send you home early, so you won't get a chance to get the full experience. And new shooters never what yes, people are allowed to give you a hard time if you DQ. They're not allowed to make you feel too bad, but they don't want to let you forget it because there are two kinds of shooters. There's guys that have DQ'd and there are guys that will DQ. It happens to everybody. It happens and the funny thing is it usually doesn't happen a lot when you very first get started because you're working so hard um, you're moving slowly. You're considering what it is you're doing. It happens when you start to get comfortable and start to feel like you got under control, and then you start moving a little bit fast, and you retreat on a position, or you or you try to rip the gun out too fast, and you send a shot into the dirt early, things of that nature. So, um, some of those things happen when you're trying to move quickly. But I'd say your first match, like you said, try to number one, be safe. Number two, try to have some fun. Don't try to be a GM on your first day. Try to get out there, follow the rules, see if you got any mentors or any good shooters in your group. Try to watch some of the things they're doing. Don't be afraid to ask them a question. If they don't want to talk to you, it's fine. But the culture that I've experienced in this sport overall is people are friendly for the most part. They'll talk to you. They'll tell you what they know, what they think, especially when you're new because they don't see you they don't see you as a threat to beating them anyway. So they're happy
Yep.
to they're happy to tell you whatever it is that they know. And come up with and learn to come up with a stage plan. Understand how to walk stages, counting your targets, counting your rounds, are things that will make a difference in the end. So, learn understanding scoring I think is an important thing. I got my RO cert just so I could understand the rules better, to be honest. After I was about 6 months in, I was like, how can I get certified as a range officer so that I can, it can make me sit and understand the rules because it took two whole days of watching PowerPoints and understanding the rules. So I found that was definitely helpful for me.
Mhm.
Any other advice you want to give new shooters going out to the
I
first match?
just don't be afraid to go out there and try because it's better than not trying at all. And just be
100%.
optimistic. Just be optimistic about it and just have a good time with it. That's literally the biggest two things I've learned, not only in shooting, but in life in general. Just be optimistic, try it out. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. But more than likely, you'll find a good group of friends,
Mhm.
you'll make connections, and you'll go far with it. So,
Awesome. I think my biggest advice was don't feel like you need to buy a new gun. If you have a gun, there's a reasonable size gun. Don't come out there with a tiny gun. Some people do. One of my buddies that we go back and forth all the time now. He started with a Glock 43, shot it for 6 months. Now he's running a Glock 17, and he's amazing with it. You know, Eric, the
yeah, I do know Eric.
yeah, Eric. The first time I went out, Eric was out ripping a Glock 43. His hands are just as big as mine. I was like, I don't know how he's holding it, but don't go out and feel like you need to buy a $2,000, $3,000 gun. Whatever you got, come understand what it is you're doing, learn what it is you're doing, and kind of learn how the sport works so that when you do buy a gun that you like, you know what you want it to do.
Mhm.
The rookie mistakes that can happen, trying to go out there on your first day. Don't number one, don't try to, like we said, don't try to go super fast. Don't try to GM on your first day. Try to understand what you're doing. Make sure look to the RO if you have questions. Don't be afraid to ask them anything. When you're up at the line,
Mhm.
it's your time to shine. It's your time to you take as much time as you need, but you don't want to hold up progress. But ask the RO and listen to what they're telling you, um, and walk your stage. Try to remember your stage plan. I think the best advice I got when I was new is walk your stage as many times as you can, and then mentally rehearse it so that you have it down. So you're not um, so when that buzzer goes off, your mind doesn't go blank.
Mhm.
Which happened to me for I think the first 5 or 6 matches. Every time the buzzer would go, it was like, wait, how did I get here? um, and I 100% agree with you. Stay positive.
Yeah, man. I feel like I have a luxury of running. I run the league nights at my club on
Mhm,
Tuesday nights with Noah. So like the first 3 Tuesdays we have the luxury of running. And we get a lot of rookies come to that just because it's a good intro into USPSA and competitive shooting. So like the biggest rookie mistakes that I see, right, are like guys who try to really rush the process because they want to chase me or they want to chase Noah or they want to chase Sean or the other guys who show up pretty frequently who are like higher ranked and they're like, oh, I want to be like them. Like, let me just start blasting away. But unfortunately, at that dude, when I first started shooting, I had terrible fundamentals, especially with grip until like Rob Afani. I don't know if you know him, but Rob like
mhm,
literally broke down grip for me and like I had a light bulb moment and I figured it out. But again, like learning how to be safe, learning what you can and cannot do, right? So like, like we talked about before, like the 180 is a big thing. Like a lot of people don't understand, especially, when going from like right to left. They
mhm,
tend to want to swing. If you're right dominant, they want to swing that barrel around. I
mhm,
thankfully had a very nice lady, Pia, if she ever sees this clip, dude, like she taught me, like I call it the Pia rules. Like when you're going from right to left, just break the wrist, point it down range. You'll never break the 180 that way. And I
mhm,
thankfully, like knock on would have been very good about like, staying away from that.
mhm,
But again, it's just like remembering the big safety rules, remembering it's your time, especially at the make ready and the when you start, when you stop shooting is when you do the whole process of unloading and showing clear. I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of guys try to race that bit. I'm like, dude, you're off the timer. Like, by all means, please just take the time to, make sure you're clear, finger off the trigger, pull the trigger, and then put it back in the holster safely. Don't just like dump it in there.
Mhm.
Especially if you should never do that in general, but especially if you're new, you know what I mean?
Right, 100%. Those are I started hosting some new shooter mini matches at one
Hmm.
of our local clubs that hadn't started doing them yet. We had our second practice this past Thursday. I posted about it, but we went over those exact same things you're talking about. We didn't really run any stages yet. They're going to have their first match next week. I had some of my more experienced guys, a couple of my real experienced guys, a couple of A-class shooters come out and help work with the guys, and we went over just getting out of the holster, reloading left to right, right to left, and moving, retreating around the wall, things that making sure you can keep that gun going downrange because it was those are the things that cause a DQ or can cause your day to end early. So um I think the paying it forward, those new shooter classes that you guys are running, having new guys come out
Hmm.
that a lot of the clubs do, I think those are essential into growing the sport and making sure people can have a fun, safe time. ROing is important, and the draconian rules around the sport are what keep it safe. Even when the RO tells you to stop, it's not always because they're going to DQ you. Sometimes there's a stage malfunction, but a lot of times people are, they get nervous. And like you said, the rushing back into the holster is the thing I found to be the most critical. You know, I, People, their engine oil is jacked up from running the stage. They're excited, um,
Hmm.
and they watch experienced guys like yourself. Uh, when they're done, they pop that bullet out of there. They got the bullet out of the gun, and the gun is open and show clear, and before anybody can see it, and the R was able to just tell them, they hear it all in one line because the guys that are all on they know you're safe. They say, if you're finished unloaded, show clear, clear, hammer down holster, and you're back in the holster. But that's, that for a new shooter, the RO's also got to take some responsibility and slow down, take a breath.
Hmm.
The timer's done. Now let's get your gun back in your holster safely. I think that's a super important one. That's something that you can practice at home.
Hmm.
With snap caps, getting the bullet out of the gun at the end, getting it back in the holster because you're going to be nervous. You know, there's a lot of good shooters that still, they still get nerves because they want to do well. Everybody gets nerves, but when you're new, it's on a different level because you haven't learned to manage them yet. So, um, you know, being safe, following the rules, practicing simple things like that become super important. I remember getting ready for Aruba. It was my first time shooting IPSC. I had like 4 or 5 times before the start. I took a sight picture, and the RO was like, "You can't take a sight picture." I was like, "Oh yeah." I remember that after the first day, and they took it easy on me. They didn't crush me over that night, I remember I went home, practiced my make ready in my hotel room about 100 times, just pulling out, pointing at the ground,
Hmm.
so I wouldn't keep doing it, and and it helps. So don't be afraid to dry fire to the things that you're gonna have to do at the range. Even the small things, it'll help you remember to do it when you get there, when everything's going and you got a million things in your mind. So, all right. Let's see. Do you want to talk a little bit about prepping before you run your first stage?
Yeah, let's talk about shooting. Yeah, let's talk about prepping the stage, walking the stage, and then like the whole process of the stage. I feel like that's something that a lot of guys don't know how to do well, right? I've always described shooting, I don't know about you, but I've always described shooting to everybody, whether you're a shooter or not, as like chess, but with like a little bit of athleticism and a lot of shooting skill. That's how I've always described it. So it's like, how do I get from point A to point B in the shortest amount of time possible in the most efficient way time possible? And that whole process for me starts in the walkthrough, right? So like I'm looking at the brief, looking at the targets, Like a lot of my coaches are always like, make shooting easier because if you make it easier, you're less likely to mess it up, right?
Mm,
So like I've always walked the stage with that in mind. Like even so, like I shot Lipsa March Madness this past weekend, right? So it's one match, but was able to thankfully ask the guys to let me shoot it twice because this year I'm shooting a lot of majors. I'm shooting a lot of we're shooting factory gun together. So we'll hopefully show you on a squad for that together too. But like I wanted the reps and I wanted to see the processing and see my times. So like they have a lot of data, but I was able to walk the stage, plan my course of fire, and try to figure out the most efficient way to improve it out because I had 2 days of shooting. So like I was able to see the data in real time, right?
mhm,
So like, when you're first walking the stage, you'll hear the brief from the RO or the CRO, whoever's there working it, or one of the more experienced guys. From there, you should be looking at the targets, following usually the most experienced guys, what I see a lot of guys do, and like definitely take if they're willing to take you under the wing, like I always make a point of it. Like if you're a new shooter, you want to ask what I'm doing, by all means ask. I won't always recommend it because what I'm trying to do for myself at this point is work on those higher level skills. But I will help you get from point A to point B as safely as possible, right? Like that's what we're all here for. We're all trying to get home at the end of the day. We want to make sure we're having a good experience.
mhm.
But essentially, you want to figure out how you're shooting the stage and what order you're shooting the stage, and then from there, like you said, rehearse it or program it.
Mhm.
So like I feel like when I talk to a lot of guys now, I'm like, oh, how are you shooting the stage? They're like, I'm gonna go to this corner, shoot this array, then shoot this. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm like, let's take a step back from point A, right? From point one, order out what cadence, and then from there, where are you going?
Mhm.
And that's how I broke it down some guys this weekend, and they did very well actually. So it's things to a level and how to get the job done as easy as possible, and then the shooting becomes a lot easier once you automate it.
No, I agree. Though I'll I'll say especially with following some of the better shooters there, one thing, I would do sometimes because my skill level definitely wasn't where theirs was. So you watch them do some things like, well, shooting backing up, I can't shooting while walking backwards, I can't do that quite just yet. So I'd make a mental note to go home and dry fire that and try to work on it. But I would still, I would take their plan and fit it to my skill level and ability. And I think that's a good way to preface, watching what they're doing and then modifying it to what your skill and abilities are. And it's okay to try a thing, where we're not, even in a match. Don't expect it to work well right there in, game time if you've never practiced it before. But um, even if you're going to give it a try, we're not playing for world domination at these matches. But if you want to give it a try and see how it feels on a stage, I don't see anything wrong with that. But um, typically, when I saw something new that I wanted to try or work on, I would definitely make a note. I write it down on my phone so that I could try it when I got home, see what the dot looked like
Mhm.
uh, when I did it, and practice it until I could make the dot make sense on a target while trying to create that movement or copy that movement. Um, I think definitely, the for me the thing I had to learn was for my first walk through and make sure you know where all the targets can be seen, bro. Um, I think a lot of times, if you go in off the rip and just start planning
Mhm.
from time you walk onto the stage, you don't even know where all the targets are yet. So I think the first thing I would always do was go through, count the targets, see where all the targets are, where can I see them from, then my next walkthrough, I would start to kind of figure out, okay, if I want to shoot it this way, this is what my round count looks like. For us in New York, the round count, you got to start considering. I think you got to start considering your round count pretty early because we have 10 round mags. So you have to start making sense of how you're gonna, it's blending for us is not blending for people in Texas and everywhere else where they're going to rip a stage with at least 20 rounds or if your CO um with what 15 rounds of CO. So you really have to consider what
24.
20 okay 24.
It's
Yeah, but the you got to consider you know how you're going to blend your mag changes into a stage because I remember sending my first couple stages to my cousin and it was 22 rounds. He's like, why'd you change your mag so many times? I was like, well, yeah, I'm in New York. Every time I take a couple of steps, I got to change the mag. Um, but for me, counting the round, my next time through, when I'm starting to pull a stage plan together, I start to count the rounds, because it matters. In New York when you're blending, when you're trying to blend target arrays together, because you might want to take a further target and take a mag change and then pull off and start with a new target. So, um, and then as you're walking through, like you mentioned, seeing what skills the stage is looking for and seeing how you can apply them, to get through the stage. But it's all so much to consider, um, when you're first learning this, and that's why I tell people to take it easy. Don't if try not to put too much pressure on yourself because it could also be extremely frustrating. I'll say my first match I wanted, not my first match, but maybe like 10 matches in, I was like, so guys, thank you for joining us on our first episode of the Perfect Double. We're talking about new shooters coming out to their first match. I think my tip of the day really is no matter what you decide to do, just come out, come give it a shot, try it, and don't quit. If it doesn't go like you thought, which it won't, don't quit. Come back, give it 10 tries before you quit because it takes some time to get better.
Yeah, my tip of the day is gonna be similar to that, but also like always be a student, right? Like you're sometimes you're the smartest guy in the room, but other times you're not. Like always be willing to listen and learn from other guys because the things you pick up that just sometimes will click will make the experience that much better.
Awesome. Yeah, so join us next time. We're going to talk a little bit about the classification system, the infamous letters
Hmm.
going from D to GM. Some it means everything to some folks, it means nothing to some others, but we have our own opinions on it and how important it is. Um, so join us next time. You'll find us on Instagram and on YouTube. We'll have it posted if you follow us. Obviously, we'll have it posted on our pages. Come give it a look. Tell us what you think.
Hmm. Last time, guys. We'll see you later.
All right.